And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. And yes, finally, hashtag Bradley out. We can actually finally say it because it actually happened today. As most of you are aware in Toronto FC land, even for those who aren't aware, Toronto FC have officially parted ways / sacked Bob Bradley, manager and sporting director of Toronto FC. We're going to break that all down this week. We're going to talk about where did it go wrong for Bob Bradley. What does this mean for Michael Bradley and Bill Manning, who made the decision to hire him? Who's a new man in charge? It's a familiar face to a lot of TFC fans, but he's in temporarily. What does this mean for the club moving forward? And how does this impact the club beyond the first team? There's a lot to unpack here. Before we get into that, of course, we will also, or a little after that, I should say, we will get into the burning question this week, which was written before the announcement of Bob Bradley sacking, so it has nothing to do with Bob Bradley being sacked. You know, the cool thing about this is now we have a contest thanks to our friends at Nesker who normally present our burning question. So this week we are running a contest for a Federico Bernardeschi 2024 home shirt. Find us on Twitter at Toronto Till I Die. Follow the show. From there, you can find the contest, tweet and retweet that. And it gives you a chance to win. We will be picking winners at random. As an added bonus for our show listeners, is you can no longer see me, but see the shirt, because who wants to see me? You really want to see the shirt.
As an over here.
Exactly. As an added bonus, if you join the Toronto FC fan group on Nextdoor, it will count as an additional ballot entry for the contest. So I believe one of us will be popping the link for the Nextdoor group in the chat. So go ahead if you're watching this live on YouTube or wherever you're watching, and join the Nextdoor Facebook or Nextdoor group, and we will use that as an additional ballot for you. Lots to dig into this week. Obviously, we got to talk about the big news. So let's get into it with my co-host, Michael Singh and Jeffrey P. Nesker. Guys, I'd ask how your weekend's going, but who cares? The manager got sacked. What's up?
Actually, I was actually just wondering, okay, before we get into that, just out of curiosity, because we're giving away the jersey. Has your impression of the jersey changed at all? Has it grown on you a little bit? Has it got worse? Like, what do you guys think of TFC's?
Jeffrey,
the jersey or the Berna jersey? Go ahead, Mikey. Sorry.
No, I was about to say, you have probably a stronger opinion on this, Jeff, as a kit man who's done articles and podcasts on kits.
And is friends with the guy who designed it and his articles. I am biased, but I will let you know, TFC canceled all of our COVID cash. We all got an email like you have until June 30th to spend that money you had left over from keeping your money in escrow over the COVID season. Of course, there's no home games by June 30th. Now, you can ostensibly go, like I'll be going tomorrow to BMO and see what TFC they have at a Cansock game. But I went right to Real Sports once I realized that there was no saving, no extensions, no nothing. And I finally dropped the trigger on my number 8 Victor Vasquez kit. So I now have the best. I may have the only other kit. I may have the only other number 8 Vasquez kit next to Victor Vasquez, which makes it the coolest thing in the world. And I can't wait. I can't wait to
forever a club legend. I respect it.
Yeah, no, man. Look, I've always been okay with the kit. I understand the hoopla around it. This is not to go back and go over it because we've already talked about it on this podcast already. But I'm wearing a kit that has a whole bunch of like black on it, and I use my COVID cash to get this one. But yeah, like in the end of the day, a kit's a kit. They play in it. They'll remember if you win in it, and they'll remember also if you lose in it. And right now, TFC doing a lot of losing in that kit.
That segue was beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful segue.
I mean, let's get into it, guys. Look, I think a lot of the fandom has been looking for this moment to come. It has finally dropped. I want to get your guys' impressions on, first of all, just the timing of the announcement, because it feels like a lot of people thought this should have happened a lot earlier. Like, why now and not a couple of weeks ago? Jeff, I'll start with you and then I'll come over to you, Mike. But, your just impressions on the sort of timing of the announcement of the sacking of Bob Bradley.
I actually slept in this morning because I was battling a summer cold over the end of last week, and it's mostly gone away, but it's still it's hanging around in weird ways. So I actually woke up to the news. I mean, I rolled out of bed and I was like, it's 10:30. Why did I sleep in until 10:30? And then saw my phone had absolutely exploded. So I didn't actually physically get out of bed for like another 2 hours because I was just sitting there dealing with the ramifications, checking in with WTR, checking in with the discourse on Twitter. It was a real fun discourse on Twitter today, I have to say. It got heated in places, but I do think it's amazing where the club and the fandom are now versus where they were prior to the announcement today. A lot of things have come out of the woodwork today. A lot of really uncomfortable discussions have happened. And I think it's actually put into kind of sharp relief. I'm going to wear the tag of the Bob apologist today. I am. And I'm also going to wear the tag of the guy that's going to eat a gigantic poo sandwich if the DPs start producing, because I think the most we can hope for out of these DPs right now, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll revisit it later, is a little bit of a new coach bump, but they're eventually going to regress to the mean. And I feel like all of that has been kind of dredged up today. So it's been a real exhale for the fan base. And I'll even say this, the people that were so militantly about getting their pound of flesh, now that they have it, I think in a lot of ways their eyes have been opened up that this isn't entirely on Bob. And now that he's gone, there's no place for any of the other parties to hide. And I'm really looking forward to how that shakes out.
Yeah, when I saw the news this morning, wasn't surprised. I think the writing has been on the wall for this for a long time. I mean, we've talked about it on the show, it seems like, for a very long time. The timing of it in particular, now that I'm thinking about it logically, it makes a lot of sense, right? You go away to Cincinnati, go away to New England, one of the toughest, I guess, road stretches of the season. You kind of want to get through that and then give, the firing of a manager is a lot more than the firing of a manager. It's kind of symbolic of this new fresh start. So you want to give whoever comes next or this new era a good starting place, and at home to Real Salt Lake on Canada Day, that's a good way to kick off kind of a new era for Toronto FC. So the timing of it from that regard, not really too surprised. Overall, I guess on the firing itself, I think one of the things that, and why it took so long, a lot of people are going to be asking that question, but I think for me, one of the reasons why it took so long is that we all know that Bob Bradley was signed a long-term contract here with Toronto. I believe it was a 5-year contract that he signed. And MLSE, as we've talked about on this show, they're not exactly dishing out tons of money right now to Toronto FC, and that's the reason why Toronto FC have only 2 DPs. So they're making a big time investment here to sack Bob Bradley by still paying him the remaining of his long-term contract. Also, I think we have to mention Mike Sorber as well, who was technical director and assistant coach. They're now paying more money to get rid of those guys. So that kind of tells you where things were from a results perspective, but B, also where things were behind the scenes, I think, with the way that he was handling the dressing room at this point of his tenure.
Yeah, and it's funny because, yes, Jeff, I kind of like your point of, everybody wanting a pound of flesh, and now are maybe going to realize that it wasn't all just the manager. But of course, that this is football, right? And when results aren't coming in, when players aren't playing up to potential or the perceived potential, that is always eventually, from at least a fan base perspective, is going to fall on the manager. And that person is always going to be the one blamed. And Mike, to your point around timing, I get what you're saying, like in terms of like, look, you get through a rough stretch. You don't want your interim manager, who, by the way, was announced today. It's going to be Terry Dunfield, former Toronto FC midfielder, Canadian international Terry Dunfield, who has been in the youth ranks for the last couple of years, starting with really the young kids, and I think recently with the U17s. Is moving temporarily into the full-time job. Like, you don't want Terry Dunfield to go into, Cincinnati and New England and have to already play the two of the three best teams in Major League Soccer right away. Now, that doesn't say that he's not going to have a challenge against RSL. They've been playing all right lately, but it does give a little bit of an opportunity for that, a full week, mostly of training. Obviously, they didn't train today, but they'll sort of resume tomorrow and get ready for Saturday. So, I guess, where did it go wrong for Bob Bradley? I mean, really, into the end of the day, like you guys were doing the podcast before I brought this, but we were doing this on other shows like the Tunnel Club and things like that, talking about the end of the 2021 season. Who do you bring in? The only natural fit is Bob Bradley. It only made sense to shoot.
He was the chosen one.
Fit. Yeah, in a lot of ways, right? Like, so. When he was hired, everybody was like, no, duh, of course you go get Bob Bradley because of his credentials, because of what happened in LAFC. Before that, even the players that he's brought through, the managing tree that now exists from the tree of Bradley, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet none of that ever seemed to really take root in Toronto. I wondered what you guys think about that. Like, what do you think brought him down? Jeff, go ahead. I know you're buzzing to go.
I think it was bad planning from all parties. I don't think the Bradleys expected there to be as much blowback on their relationship, their familial relationship. But of course, that was used as ammunition by people that were out to get them. And I don't think they considered that. I also don't think that Bob Bradley was really given a fair shake. I think, let's just look at LAFC. His success at LAFC was building a team from the ground up, right? We were tearing a team down for him to build it from the ground up. But before he even took his shoes off or put his pens in the pen carrier in his office, they're like, by the way, we've spent 75% of your budget on these two wingers. Go win. And I think those two things are we'll find out, probably incompatible. It was doomed to failure, and it's easy to say that after the fact. I do want to step back for two things. Mike, that's awesome. Mikey Singh, I didn't actually put two and two together about the whole Canada Day, get the interim coach in, etc., etc. But to turn it on its head, we all knew we weren't winning these two away games. So it seems a little disingenuous that Bob falls on his sword for losing two games that we all knew we weren't going to win. And that's not really a question. It's just a thought. And then my last thought is, like, listen, I think MLSE is still paying Mike Babcock until the end of this month. I do think they're still on the hook for some of his salary. And I'm not sure of the numbers, but I do know that there's a shakeup on the MLSE board in terms of Larry Tannenbaum now auctioning off some of his stock holdings, some of his share in the property. So there are things going on above the line that affect the whole organization, not just TFC. Forget about what's going on with the Raps and the Leafs and all of the shakeups that are going on there. It's no secret that TFC doesn't rank highly on MLSE's list of priorities. So when you combine that with the 5-year deal, when you combine that with Bob's pedigree, when you combine that with the fact that, we weren't, aside from the Philadelphia game, and this has been said all day today, we weren't really getting blown out. The margins were very, very fine. So there was this hope that somehow things would regress to the mean. I mean, I was there. I had it myself. They're making an insane cost outlay now to do this. And I don't think they wanted to. And why? Because of what you said. The fan base is not apathetic. They're adversarial. You know what I mean? The temperature is just too high. And so something had to be done. And like you said very eloquently, Mike, sometimes for better or worse, better coaches than Bob Bradley have been fired for worse reasons. This is not an outlier in world football. This happens all the time. So it was expected.
Mike, before you just jump in here really quickly on 2 points, I think, Jeff, you do make a good point there. However, I will say that although TFC were never, again, aside from the Philadelphia game and really Cincinnati this past weekend, blown out of matches where they just were clearly not they were second best, and it was by a long shot. You also felt, even though in those closer games, that TFC had no cutting edge to be able to find 100%. A way to get points or win. Well, maybe get points they could draw, but not to win games. And like I've said before, and you guys have both said this, and a lot of you listening have said this before, this team is not built to develop in a year, right? It's not meant to crest in 2024. That's not the plan. The plan is to be competitive now, right? And you have a window. It does exist now. How you determine what that window is and how long it can stretch, that's another thing. But this team is built to win now. And I've said it before, although you're getting rid of Bob Bradley, because yes, managers have to pay the costs when teams don't win and players don't perform. But there has to be some questions around the decision-making of bringing in some of these players. And some of that's on Bob and some of that's not on Bob. And there is a bigger institutional, and I think you were scratching at it a bit, Jeff, issue at Toronto FC right now. And I think that there is this question of, where is this club really going? What is this club going to be? And I think that's what fans are frustrated with. Bob was a lightning rod for it, but it's not the actual lightning. Like, the actual lightning is...
Say the name.
Well, I mean, look, a lot of people are saying it's Bill Manning, right? That I'm saying that. I'm not. I know, Mike, you're not saying that, but I am.
I'm saying it too.
Exactly. Because I think there is a question now around the fact that this president now has brought in 2 full-time managers and another interim out there. Like, he didn't hire Greg Vanney. Okay, that's fine. But he stuck with him. He understood continuity. He kept him when a lot of people back in 2015, when we lost in the playoffs, were saying,
we're calling for his head. Yeah.
I just remember that. That's revisionist history. Some people don't remember. But so you got to give him credit for that. You also have to give him credit for the moves he made to get this team over the top. He was a part of that, but Tim Bezbachenko was a lot of the architect around a lot of that. But since then, and again, it goes back to what Pablo Maurer talked about a couple of weeks ago on our show. Since the decision, whatever happened with Greg Vanney and his contract extension, and it didn't get done. Yes, okay. Some people say he got his head turned by LA Galaxy, but let's be real, that wasn't exactly it, right? It has been kind of miscalculation after miscalculation with this club.
It's been an unrepentant disaster. I mean, let's call a spade.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't looked like they haven't been a team that's been able to cycle into the new generation of MLS. It just has not done very well in that. And I think there are questions around, Bob has to take a part of this blame 100%. That's not to absolve him of blame, but I think there's this other pedestal. I guess we'll get to that in a bit, but just keeping that in mind. Mike, sorry, I know you wanted to jump in, so just want to let you go.
No, I think you make a fair point. I think let's get to that in a bit. I still want to talk about Bob Bradley's tenure a little bit here. And one of the questions you asked earlier was, where do you think things went wrong with Bob Bradley? And I think, Jeff, you kind of touched on it, and I do want to just reiterate your point. He was given a deck of cards in some essence before he arrived. And of course, his ace was a guy that, quite frankly, he didn't want. Bob Bradley didn't want to spend that much money on Lorenzo Insigne. But of course, that decision was made before Bob Bradley arrived at Toronto FC. So he was dealt a hand in which he had to play a card that was kind of in a way forced upon him. Bernardeschi, Bob Bradley did have some sign off on Bernardeschi, but after meeting Bernardeschi, I mean, when you hear all the right things, it's tough to say no to and we all see what Bernardeschi's like, his personality and everything, and of course you want to buy into that right away. So I don't really fault Bob for signing off really on that one when Bernardeschi's saying all the right things and this player of his caliber. Now, when you look at his tenure overall, I do have to mention that during his time here, he was asked to essentially rebuild the club. And that's why you saw so many departures ahead of last season, the 2022 season. You saw the team playing essentially all kids, and that's because he was asked to, reset the culture and rebuild the club. And while doing that, you're also trying to manage different things that are on the books that were pre-existing from the Ali Curtis tenure. And of course, one of the things I'm referring to is, the Josie Altidore contract, the Dom Dwyer contract, the Kamar Lawrence contract, trying to... The two goalkeepers, trying to move on from Oro Jr., trying to move on from some of your center backs, trying to figure out how to get rid of Jefferson Soteldo and how to exactly manage that moving forward. So there was still a lot on his plate right there. So it wasn't as easy as just, getting rid of a new team and bringing in a different team. And of course, when we look at last season and kind of what was in a way, sort of this second life for this Toronto FC team with the arrivals of Insigne and Bernardeschi and Marc-Anthony Kaye and Richie Larea and Domenico Crescito, is that at that point of the season, and we were all talking about it on this show, regardless of what we had in mind in terms of a long-term vision with this club, expectations were raised. So last summer, expectations were raised. And in particular, with the Italians, they came in and they expected a different type of environment and a different type of culture and a different type of winning mindset with their teammates and with Bob Bradley, without really understanding the process here. But when you go out and you're investing that much money and the results are as bad as it is, and then, halfway, I guess, through that tenure, when TFC all of a sudden start losing games, obviously Lorenzo Insigne has his personal situation, that's when I think things started to really unravel for Bob Bradley. And to be frank, I'm not sure if I've ever publicly said this on this show, but that's the reason Domenico Crescito left Toronto, is because I don't think he really loved his relationship that he had with Bob Bradley. And there was obviously the relationship between Insigne and Bernardeschi, and Crescito being caught in kind of the middle of that as well. There was just a lot there for Mimo to be like, I think Genoa is probably a little bit more appealing for me right there. So the good news for Bob Bradley, I mean, it was good news in hindsight, or, at the time, was that heading into 2023, this season, you kind of sold his DPs that are still there, and Insigne and Bernardeschi, on the fact that they're going to be a better team this year. Look, we're bringing in Sean Johnson. We're bringing in Matt Hedges. We're bringing in Raul Petretta, a guy who's going to be on your flank, and a guy who's played in the Champions League, and Sigurd Rosted as well. And obviously you have Victor Vasquez and Diamande. We're bringing back Osorio. At that point, you kind of were able to sell Insigne and Bernardeschi on buying back into what they believed at least could be some sort of winning team. And when it didn't start well, you kind of started to see ripples of last season kind of getting through the cracks again. Bernardeschi in the third game of the season
so done with these guys.
Said we're not playing football, right? And then obviously when Austin came around, Bernardeschi was kind of fed up. And, we all read the Athletic article. We all know some of the stories behind the scenes, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of exactly what the club culture was overall. And now we can say whose fault that is. Is that Bob Bradley's fault? Is it Bill Manning's fault on the recruitment side? Is it the players themselves who have to take some kind of responsibility there? It's a lot. But for me, like that was kind of where things went wrong overall. It's just the fact that, yes, Bob Bradley was brought in to kind of rebuild the club, but at the same time, it wasn't necessarily all of his choices here to rebuild the club. And he was asked to be, and I've written about this. So he was also asked to fast track his rebuild, right? TFC in this season, I don't think
with no money, because we spent it all on Lorenzo and Bernardeschi.
Well, that actually came halfway through too, Jeff. The intention was to bring in 3 DPs, but because of the way that last season ended, my understanding is that money was then, I guess, in a way taken off the board, right? So then not only was he asked to go out and win games, but he was asked to go out and win games with a smaller budget than he had existing. So when I say he had to fast track a rebuild, it's because TFC wasn't going to get money without winning. But, that's not the blueprint I guess they set out to begin with. So they tried to fast track a rebuild, and I think that's what's got us to the position that we are today.
Right. So let's then, if you don't mind, guys, let's maybe go quickly into sort of, obviously Bob comes in. You're talking about trying to rebuild the squad. Was he asked? Was he asked to do too much too soon, or was it more of a situation of, maybe if you're bringing in a manager like this, you sort of have to go as either the president of the club or as the board, go in being like, hey, we're bringing in this caliber of manager who, look, the pedigree we all know. You have to then go in and say, we got to back him with the funds in the market to go out and get the players he wants if it's a rebuild, right? Like, I guess where is the disconnect there? Because the money was there last year, right? Like, it wasn't like it got that money wasn't there. And I know they spent it on Insigne and Bernardeschi, and they got Mark Anthony Kay and things like that. But again, like you said, that was halfway through last season. So I guess why not back him in the January transfer window at that time to allow him to sort of build and try to give himself a little bit more runway to build the team?
These are great questions that I think Bill Manning has to answer for. I mean, when you hire a artiste or an auteur, you back the auteur. You don't kneecap them immediately when they arrive. There have been 50,000 points in this chat, like, well, Bob turned around and signed Vasquez and Diamande. That completely misses the point. I mean, when you have two nickels to rub together, you're not signing Erling Haaland. You know what I mean? And the fact, like Diamande probably agreed to come in at a very low salary for what, again, I don't want to misconstrue, but those personal relationships may be what got the deals over the line. So you can't hang his feet over the fire for both reasons. That's what I thought we were doing. I thought we were backing Bob Bradley and letting him work. That's why today is such a shock for me. And as all these things come out of the woodwork, we have just been grinding metal for a year and a half. Like, this was doomed to failure the moment that we hired him, because we weren't hiring Bob Bradley and letting Bob Bradley be Bob Bradley. We were hiring Bob Bradley and then immediately cutting off his limbs and asking him to do what he does with limited resources and with the deck stacked against him. That's an impossible mission. Somebody earlier in the chat said, well, why would you take that? Who's going to refuse a 5-year guaranteed contract? Most of these coaching jobs end with acrimony. That's just the way it goes. You know what I mean? And nobody can tell the future. So to chide Bob Bradley for walking into an impossible mission with a 5-year guaranteed contract and the chance to maybe close out his coaching career, coaching his son, every last one of you would have done that. So I don't buy it. Like, that's craziness. This revisionist history drives me nuts.
I'm not quite Mission Impossible, because I do think there's plenty of mistakes that were made along the way by Bob Bradley from a roster building standpoint. This season alone, like, they're obviously a top heavy team. We've talked about that, but when you're looking at signings like Sigurd Rosted, when you're looking at signings like Raul Petretta, Victor Vasquez isn't on the cheapest deal. Diamande isn't on the cheapest deal at all. Diamande is actually making quite a bit of money. So when you look at those 4 signings in particular, and then some of the trades that TFC made, I mean, let's face it, like the Mark Anthony Kay trade, probably an overpay, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at the Jacob Schaffelberg deal, now that we're under the impression that Richie Laryea is going to walk from TFC, probably not the best deal. The CJ Sapong one's a little bit. If you're just looking at CJ Sapong for Lucas McNaughton plus up to $200,000 in allocation money, not a great deal. But then you have Ame Babika, who kind of rescued and salvaged that deal for TFC. But that could have looked really bad, right? So there's certain moves that Bob Bradley's made throughout his tenure here that it's not like everything he's done has been perfect. So from that standpoint, they didn't get the recruitment that TFC did, and that's a lot of different reasons. It doesn't just fall on Bob Bradley, although he is the guy that's going to shoulder the blame. The recruitment hasn't been good enough from this team for a lot of different reasons. And one of the things he's talked about is the team hasn't done a good enough job at creating assets. There's no players right now on Toronto FC, aside from maybe the free agents that you signed, that you can trade that are going to give you legitimate assets coming back the other way. Yep. And that's when you know. That's when you know just how bad the roster is right now. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would argue also that from an academy perspective, you haven't developed players that are really going to move the needle in terms of bringing in any kind of assets either, right? Like if you talk about recouping money paid by moving players out, the only player that's really worth anything in terms of that is Jaquil, and even Jaquil's stock has dropped, and not necessarily because of Jaquil, right? Like, so it's partly by the way the club has handled him. So from that perspective, you have put yourself in a lot of deficits. Now, again, whether that's all Bob, whether I'm sure there is blame to go around quite a bit in the TFC front office, and we can get into that. I really want to just touch really quickly on sort of what does this mean for like Michael Bradley. Now, obviously, if you were watching or looking online this weekend, there was pictures surfacing of him in Wales, obviously in UK getting treatment, but also at the Wales FA doing his coaching badges and things like that. But let's maybe not speculate that way, because we just don't know. But what does this mean for Michael Bradley now? He's going to be returning before the end of the season to playing condition at some point. So what does this mean for him, both as a captain, but also what does his future look like at the club?
He's going to go studs out on Bernardeschi in the first training session. That's for sure. I mean, what does it mean? Look, I choose Michael. I know that's completely inconsequential, but in all things, I choose Michael Bradley. I'm sure it's not good. It can't be good. And I think he'll have a chip on his shoulder, and hopefully it'll get excised on the pitch, not in the locker room, but I'm not holding my breath for that. I think he's coming back in guns blazing, for looking for revenge for those that have besmirched him and his family name.
Is this the plot of Kill Bill or Michael Bradley coming back to TFC?
No,
man, I think our training injuries for the Italians are going to triple exponentially once he's back on the squad. But that's just me.
I think kind of what Jeff illustrated there is that it will be a really awkward environment for Michael. There's no two ways about it, right? It probably has been a little bit of an awkward environment for him in general throughout this whole process and during Bob's tenure here with Toronto. I know they've worked together, but we all know like this time it was different. And it pains me to say this, but in a way, Bill Manning firing Bob Bradley kind of made Bill choose a side here. Now
he chose himself.
But he also chose the side of the Italians, right? And in a way, he kind of had to choose the side of the Italians because they're both signed to big contracts and both signed to long-term deals, and it might be tough to get rid of those guys. But in a way, he had to do that. So as team captain, it's going to be very awkward, I think, for Michael Bradley to walk back into that dressing room. And when he does do that, I do wonder if it'll be one of the last times that he does walk back into the dressing room. I do wonder if Michael Bradley, for some way, the way that this has all been handled by, kind of his teammates as well, if this is the way, it ends for Michael Bradley, which to me it's so disappointing.
But that's TFC, isn't it? Right? Like
that's TFC. We can't say goodbye to players.
We don't do well by our veterans. Or we don't do well by our legends. We just don't.
We just don't.
Not very many get to walk out the door in a great way at this club. It just really has never really
Such a
happened.
Such a good point. And it's disgusting.
Right, like, and we don't know yet, right? Maybe he does come back, maybe he does play spectacularly at the end, and who knows? Maybe he does go on and play another year. We don't know.
He's the ultimate professional too, right?
He really is.
I don't want to say that, but like it's such a tall task, and think about how awkward you would be if you had to show up in that dressing room knowing that a lot of the players probably in that dressing room wanted Bob out, your father out. And as the team captain, your responsibility is to still keep the team going forward. But are they going to listen to you if they weren't in a way kind of respecting and hearing Bob out? So it's a really tough task for Michael. And I do wonder if it's too tall of a task for him to, one, overcome, and two, be enough to resign and want to re-sign and continue his legacy here in Toronto, or if maybe that's the way that it ends, which again would just be such a disappointment.
Such a bummer.
Yeah, it would be. It would be if that is the case. But we'll see as he's still on the road to recovery. We touched on it earlier, but I want to bring in the Bill Manning conversation because I think a lot of people, now that, sort of one domino here has fallen, what about the other one, the big one? And look, I think we've talked about it before, but, Bill Manning is pretty ensconced in his role at TFC, and not just TFC. Remember, he's also president of the Argonauts. He's been here for 8 years. Like, it's not a situation where, you're letting him go lightly. What does sort of his decision, as you alluded to, Mike, in terms of picking the Italians, quote unquote, in removing Bob Bradley as head coach, what does that mean for him in terms of his relationship with the team, his relationship with whoever gets picked next as the permanent manager of Toronto FC? Who takes this job? Is this now a poison chalice job for a manager? And what does this mean to his relationship with the board? Because in the end, he's got people he's got to answer to, and that's the MLSE board. So, just wanted to sort of touch on that and what you guys thought on that. Mike, go first, and Jeff, I'll come to you.
I think his seat is on fire.
On fire! Yes.
There is now no one standing in between him and the firing line for anyone else, right? He's now, since Greg Vanney. So let's start with the Greg Vanney decision, right? He played a big role in the reason why Greg Vanney isn't still at this club today. And obviously, we know that Vanney wanted more than just money. He wanted more control over some of the decision-making at the club. And Bill Manning ultimately backed Ali Curtis there in that scenario, which led to Greg Vanney deciding to walk to the LA Galaxy, right? The only real successful coach Toronto FC has ever had here in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And then you let Ali Curtis go out and hire his guy in Chris Armas. Again, I have to emphasize that Bill Manning let Ali Curtis hire his guy. So Bill Manning still does, I know maybe he, in a way, kind of tries to dodge a bullet there, but no, that's still his decision to do that. Javier Perez, I mean, you can't really say anything. It was an interim manager for the rest of the season. But then, a year and a half ago at the podium there at the BMO Trading Ground, Bill Manning sat at the podium, introduced Bob Bradley, and said Bob Bradley was the right guy at the right time to lead this club forward. A year and a half later, he has to fire his guy. So there's no more chances, I guess you can say, for Bill Manning. And to be honest, I'm surprised he even gets one more chance here to appoint a new head coach, and we'll see exactly what route he decides to take on that path. What I will say is that I also do believe that his role as the president of the Toronto Argos does carry some weight in terms of how long he's been able to keep his job here with Toronto FC. I think if all things were being equal and he was just the president of Toronto FC, I'm not sure he would still be in the position that he is today. That being said, I do also want to reiterate that I still think Manning is a very good executive. I think he's really good at what he does. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting the results and you're missing on some of your DP signings and you're having to recycle coaches every year, it seems like, at a certain point, the results just speak for themselves, and someone has to go down, and there's no one left now other than Bill Manning.
Yep. Listen, I have often defended Bill Manning because I think people sugarcoat what he does behind the scenes that's so important. And I think that he's developed relationships that we know nothing about that allow him to get things done in a way that works for the suits and that corporate environment. And we just gloss it over. That's done now. All of that good faith is over. All right. Nobody gets to make this into their personal fiefdom. It is a results-based business. And when we were talking about what was going on prior to Nick Bontis resigning, I'm going to give the same spiel I gave then. In corporate world, sometimes you have to fall on your sword. Bill Manning is not the man that's going to fix this team. There's too much bad blood and there's too much history of mistakes now. There's more than one soccer executive on planet Earth. and it's insane to keep circling around the drain and give these people their own personal fiefdoms. It's over for him. All right, and we've waited 2 years dancing around this with Bob Bradley, but at the end of the day, we gotta point the finger where it belongs. This man is not saving our club. He's had 2 opportunities to do it already, and even if he has it in him, it's over. I mean, it's time for new blood and fresh ideas. It is. He's got 14 MLS games to rescue his job, and I don't think he has it in him. I think this is just delaying the inevitable. And who knows what the impetus for that is, whether it's probably something as simple as that we got to pay Babcock this much money, we got to pay Bradley this much money. Let's leave Bill here for 14 days and see if he can sort his ass out. But like Mikey Singh said, his seat is on fire. I wouldn't sit on it. It's on fire. And I wouldn't be surprised if he resigns tomorrow. I mean,
he's not resigning tomorrow.
I don't think he's going to, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he does. At the end of the day, he's not the person that's going to fix this for obvious reasons, some fair, some not, some entirely in the court of fickle public opinion. Doesn't matter. That's what's written on the box. You bought the ticket, you take the ride. And it's insane that now we're like, because there's nothing better. Nah, screw that. Like, this team is broken, and you can't fix broken with the same players. This broken. You cannot fix this broken with the same players. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. The thing with sport executives that you mentioned there, Jeff, and Mike, you kind of touched on this as well. Half of their job is about the on-field product. The other half of their job is the business, right? And let's, on sporting side, we all agree we're not happy with results lately. Results have not been very good since arguably the end of 2020. Okay. The business, that's a different story, right? The business has been good, let's be real. Well, it's been good in the sense that he's been able to keep the season ticket base at a decent level, given the pandemic and given the fact this team hasn't won a lot.
He's also bought a lot of that by burning resources.
No, agreed. Right, that's part of it.
I'm not sure we can definitively say.
I don't know if they're in the black.
Good.
I think
TFC's never been in the black though.
Yeah.
TFC's never been in the black. That's the TFC is not run to run in the black. That is not the point of Toronto FC. The Toronto FC is not to run
a real estate play.
That's not the point. The point is for TFC not to be like a plucky little club that always stays in the black. That is not the point of any MLS club. Almost every MLS club loses money.
Let me ask you
in the red. Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this: has this team done enough, or do you think it's wasted? I guess the buzz and allure of the Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi signings. Do you think that
I think those players
opportunities
are responsible
gone?
for that?
I would say that if you were signing Lorenzo Insigne as a buzz player, he's not a big enough profile to really create the buzz that you need in the first place. Like, from soccer people will know who he is, but realistically, if you're signing a DP, if you're signing a DP, right? Like,
he's right, Mike.
Like, he's not big enough from a to get general people into the building. He's big in the soccer world. Lorenzo Insigne is nothing outside of it. Like, let's be real. He's not a guy who's going to drive the type of hipster soccer people know who Lorenzo is.
You don't remember when not only when he was signed, but also when he was making his debut for the club. Everything that was going, I had people that were not soccer fans at all talk to me about Lorenzo Insigne and him signing for Toronto FC.
Because his face was on.
Because his face was everywhere. They pumped all that money into advertising.
Well, not only that, a lot of people know who Lorenzo Insigne was. There's a lot of.
I don't know about that.
If you go on MLS.com right now, you have to scroll past 4,000 messy articles to get to anything about the season.
Okay, he's not messy.
They're not.
No one's saying he's messy.
But that's a player. That's the Coca-Cola player. That's who TFC thought they were getting. The guy that, Insigne, and he'd be on everybody's lips. But then they had to do all of this legwork so that people would even know how to pronounce the guy's name.
Hold on,
I mean,
Jeff. I would say that, look, no, of course you're not going to get a Messi. Messi's a Messi. That's something else completely. But when you're getting a DP and look, and Bill Manning talked about this, right? The part of signing Lorenzo Insigne was partly obviously for sporting reasons, and he's a fantastic footballer. No one has ever doubted that he's a fantastic footballer. I think the question here has been fair enough. But I think that the thing was part of this was a marketing play, right? Is to bring Italians into the stadium, to bring people in the stadium. So I think from that perspective, again, if you are somewhat tuned into sports or into soccer, you understand or have an idea of who Lorenzo Insigne is. But when you're spending money on DPs, especially the amount of money they're spending on him, it's got to transcend that in a lot of different ways. It's got to be able to grab somebody who's like, what the hell is soccer? But I kind of know who that guy is, right? And that is not what he is.
I actually think he is that. I actually think if the qualification is what the hell is soccer, I want to know who that guy is. I think he's got enough panache and ink spilled on him to be that guy.
But you had to spill all that ink, right? Like it wasn't a natural thing. It was kind of like okay.
No, none of this was natural. That's the thing. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. None of it was natural. The anticipation was that this guy was a quick and dirty path to bums in seats, activating the Italian fan base, fixing the team. But none of that has been true. None of those three things have been true, right? Like the marketing outlay for this guy. I think
he put some bums in seats. Like there are more
angry bums in seats that get on Twitter to bitch about TFC. Yeah, like I mean, that's not good. It's not good.
I'm not saying it's good, but look, like more people. Yeah,
like at the end of the day,
games. Regardless, possibly announced.
The point that I guess you're arguing there, Mike, is that it wasn't a good business decision to sign Lorenzo Insigne.
Well, I think it's a good to sign Lorenzo Insigne is a good idea
for that amount of money.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Right. That's so it wasn't a good business decision again. So that's why I go back to what we're again before you dispute whether or not Insigne was like a trend-setting player or not. Has the business really been that good for Toronto FC? Again, I haven't seen the numbers, so I can't really say yes or no definitively. But I do get the impression that the overall profile and value of this club over the last year and a half has kind of deteriorated from where it was when they announced the Lorenzo Insigne signing and the Federico Bernardeschi signings and when they made their debuts. I think at that point, there was such an opportunity for them to recapture kind of the buzz that was gone from Toronto FC through the pandemic and obviously the poor player after that. There was an opportunity there. I'll never forget sitting in the BMO Field press box and literally feeling the stadium shaking when they announced Lorenzo Insigne's name pre-game. I haven't seen the fan base as riled up since, essentially, until like after that game, obviously. That 4-0 half we'll always have. So, yeah, for me, I don't think the club has done a good enough job to kind of reap the benefits and the rewards of these two DPs, not only from the sporting sides, but I think also from a marketing standpoint. I think they've really wasted this opportunity.
Dude, let me spell it out for you. I mean, like just here's the sentence. Here it is. Here's the TRDL, the TLDR, whatever the hell. We're hiring. We speak English in Toronto for the most part, and we hired a guy to save the franchise and be the mouthpiece of the franchise that doesn't speak English. All right, let that sink in for a second. I mean, no, but seriously, they're like it's insanity. It's insanity. This guy was supposed to be the catch-all.
Kind of refuses to talk to media.
Well, I mean, this guy was supposed to be the catch-all. He was supposed to save everything. I mean, let's go here. And yeah, last year I wanted Fede to be the mayor. Does that mean that I can't change my mind, Gray? I mean, I would hate to live in a world where people can't change their minds based on new information. And new information, I mean, I might as well give him the last name Soteldo at this point for how much I like the guy. So please, by all means, hold me accountable for changing my opinion about somebody that had us all hoodwinked, by the way.
All right.
Every last one of us.
We'll get into more Insigne Bernardeschi when we do the burning question. Is there anything else you had there you want to touch on quickly?
Yeah, I think just quickly on Terry Dunfield as selected as the temporary manager of Toronto FC. Obviously, we don't know how many games he's going to end up getting. It might be till the end of the year. They might bring somebody in before the end of the season. We'll obviously see. Interesting choice. to be the interim manager, to bring in some. I mean, look, Terry Dunfield's been in and around the club since he retired, and obviously, again, like I said earlier, coaching at the youth level, both for TFC Academy, but also for the Canadian men's. I think he was at the U20 World Cup with the players a few years ago. On that coaching staff, has helped out on the senior national team as well, on different camps. What your just initial impressions on the announcement that it's Terry Dunfield that essentially will be the interim manager?
Put such a smile on my face when I got to the bottom of that press release and I saw that Terry would be taking over the role as interim. He's been on our show before. I think this was before you joined us as a co-host, Mike.
So is Terry, actually.
I think as everybody knows, like, who's had the opportunity to come across Terry, he's a guy kind of has that Federico Bernardeschi quality where he lights up a room, right? His personality is contagious. When you see Terry, you want to smile and you kind of get on the same energy. He's really good at that. So I'm so happy that he's been able to get this opportunity for him personally. He's had a lot of success too with Toronto FC's youth academy teams, right? It's not like they're just handing they're the keys to some random person that's been part of the club. No, Terry has experience with TFC's academy. He's kind of graduated through the ranks in his own bit there, and he's got a lot of experience now coaching. So for an interim manager, I think he's actually the perfect guy because he is the type of personality that can really rally a team together and kind of get them through a stretch. While he also has the soccer background. Obviously, he's played in Europe, played for some big clubs too in Europe. He's played in MLS. He's obviously a Canadian guy. So he checks a lot of boxes in that regard too. So for me, I'm thrilled. Is he going to end up being TFC's full-time manager? Probably not, but who knows? Like if all of a sudden TFC go on a run and they start clicking, I mean, how are you going to take the keys away from him when it just simply hasn't worked? So I have a lot of time for Terry, and I'm excited for his tenure here as interim head coach.
Yeah, it's a no lose scenario for him. You know, if he's able to pull anything out of this squad, he's a hero. If he isn't, it's because it was a poison chalice. So it's a pretty great stepping stone for him. I think he's going to get mollywopped by these Italians. I think he's going to get mollywopped by them. I think they're going to run roughshod over him. If they had a problem with Bob Bradley, who coached 2 international teams' tactics, because they're so smart about tactics, because they know everything being soccer players, do you think they're going to listen to Terry Dunfield, who had a cup of coffee at Man City once? Come on, it's not happening.
How about this, Jeff? Do you think Terry Dunfield's going to listen to them?
I think his mandate is to get something out of these distressed assets. I think that's
everybody's mandate that has this job to get the best out of the Italians.
I think if you're asking me who's going to challenge them and say, hey, you know what? Let's settle this like men behind the portables after class. It's not Terry Dunfield. It was Bob Bradley, and they just let him go. So I think that right now the mandate is they've just given the key. They've just let the inmates run the asylum. I've been sitting on this all episode. None of us have kids, but if you ask your kids what they want for dinner every night, you're getting them McDonald's every night. And then their heart's going to explode and they're going to weigh 400,000 pounds. And it's your fault. We've just asked the kids in the room, Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne, what they want, and they've said McDonald's every night, and we've said sure. How is that a good decision? It's a terrible decision. I understand why the decision was made, and I understand it's because, yet again, we're stuck behind the 8 ball. We bet big and we rolled snake eyes. Everything goes back to Bill Manning. I don't think Bob Bradley had any choice. He was good. He had to go.
Okay.
But there's still somebody there that has to go as well. Let's
talk about, hypothetically then, Jeff, because it doesn't seem like you think Terry is going to be the guy to be able to right this ship with the Italians and get
I
the
don't
best
think
out
there
of
is
them?
any righting this ship with the
So
Italians.
I was going to ask, is there a coach out there or anybody out there, a type of coach that you think TFC should go after permanently? Is there a profile that
the
you
Punisher,
think would work?
The Spanish Inquisition, like people that don't take any BS, because these guys are BS merchants and we've just given them all the power. You know, I am a firm believer that no player is above the badge, and my club just mandated that 2 are. And I'm having a real tough time.
But to some extent, though, do you think that if it wasn't for the Italians, Bob Bradley would still have a job here in Toronto? Do you think he's deserved a job, or do you think he deserved to get fired?
That's an impossible question, Mike, because I think the Italians are the reason that Bob Bradley wasn't successful in Toronto. A huge reason of it. Humongous. I honestly think it's as simple as that. It was a clash of strong personalities, and the wrong people in the room were given power in this situation. And
that could be true.
A very strong personality, and you gave him no ability to do what you hired him to do. And you asked him to kowtow to these morons who think they know everything.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's pretty strong.
I'm prepared to defend my position. I dislike these guys extremely.
No, fair enough. I'm not sure if they're the complete catalyst for all things wrong at Toronto FC. I think they're part of the issue right now.
We have to stop signing Soteldos.
Maybe
the shiny doesn't
but
work.
You're going to have to deal with big personalities. No matter if you go into DP market, they're always going to be. They're not all going to be kumbaya and best friends.
And dealing with them is not firing a coach because they want to vate more.
Yeah, but here's the thing: we had the same conversations about Sebastian Giovinco. We had the same conversations about Josie Altidore. The reason they got a pass is they won football matches.
And right?
That's fine. At the end of the day, that's why
that's fine. These guys are terrible luxury players in a league that doesn't do luxury players.
We're gonna get to the burning question. We're gonna get to the
burning question. But like, I think, in terms of Terry Dunfield, I don't necessarily agree with you, Jeff. I don't think he's just there to get run roughshod over.
I agree.
I think he will have backing from Bill Manning because, like you said, Mike, what else is he gonna do? He's already had to fire 2 of his guys. You're gonna have to back Terry. Because he is the guy you picked, right, to interim run this, whether it's for 5 games, 10 games, the rest of the season, we don't know yet. I'm interested to see what he can do at this level. I am interested. I've watched some of the GA Cup games. I've watched his team. They play nice football. Obviously, the question becomes, and I'm getting to you in a sec, Jeff, just in terms of, can this translate to the senior level? Can he get enough? I'm not even talking about the DPs. The DPs are one thing. I actually want to see what he can get out of the young players that have been coached by him at youth level who are now on the senior team. I want to see what he can do with those guys. Like, the DPs are going to be the DPs, and they're going to DP, do whatever they do. I really do think that I want to see what Terry can do with those guys. Can he make them better? Because if he can make them better, then that might give a springboard for TFC overall, with or without the DPs, depending how that goes. It gives them a springboard to get better. Go ahead, Jeff.
See, this line of thinking drives me crazy because we've spent so much on the DPs. Without them, we're a beer league team. And we did that to ourselves. So to make this binary argument where, like, can we do it without the DPs? Absolutely we can't. This is MLS. We've spent so much of our budget on these 2 guys that we are so wrapped up in their destiny. I want to address a comment that I starred, which is the DPs can play. They've shown it. I disagree. But the second point, we don't have to like their personalities. I don't care if they eat babies as long as they're producing on the field. What I think about them,
I think you care.
They're assholes. What I think about them, they're assholes, means nothing in the grand scheme of things. This is my problem. We have created a situation where it's now safe for them to whine and cry about anything with the expectation that the club will do it for them. All right? This is a horrible place to be in. Absolutely piss poor place to be in. We have given them all the power, and you tell me that they're not going to flex it at the first sign of trouble. There'll be no accountability from them, and it will be somebody else's fault again. Or tactics, the magical tactics thing. We have created the perfect storm of BS for our club to sink even further into its own hubris, and I hate everything about it. And I don't care if they're jerks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't think Jeff's necessarily wrong. But yeah, I'll get into it more in when we do the burning question. I just want to go back to Terry. Again, and I said my piece about Terry, and the one thing I will say, just in relation to kind of the Italians, listen, the culture starts from the top down. And yes, Bob Bradley has handled them from the day to day, but Bill Manning does establish a lot of the ground rules and a lot of the things that in a way that they can get away with. So hopefully this has all been kind of a learning curve and a learning process for him in terms of how to manage big Italian stars or big stars in general. And we'll see if maybe the culture in a little bit starts to get a little bit more sterner than maybe it has been over this last little stretch. Terry, yeah, I think the difference between Terry and Bob, and I honestly can't say I know too much about Terry's coaching style, but I do know that he's more of a modern thinker, right? I think he's open to fresh new ideas, whereas Bob has had success in Major League Soccer. And while Bob has adapted tactically in a good amount of way, but the fundamentals of his game is still very much the same. And it has been the same despite some of those changes. So I wonder if Terry comes in at a completely fresh new mindset, and maybe that's what gets the best out of this team. Sometimes you just need a fresh voice and a fresh look, and maybe Terry has what it takes to kind of get this team going, because that's what they need right now.
All right, cool. Jeff, go ahead if it's quick.
One last. I hate this. Every manager in the league would kill to have Berna and Insigne except Bob Bradley. Do we have eyes, everybody?
No,
they're not that good. All right. When did Berna score last?
They're good.
They're not that good. No, they're not.
Yes,
they're
are.
Not.
Yeah.
They're like every manager would kill to have.
I know. I do agree that every manager would not want them in MLS.
That's bullshit.
No, not
That's
every.
Unbelievable horseshit. I'm sorry.
Hold on. So I do agree that look, they are talented players. They are talented players. There's absolutely no doubt they are very, very talented players. I think now
I have doubts.
The situation in Toronto is not good. Okay, from that perspective, no, not every coach in MLS would kill to have them. I know that for a fact.
They're not superb players. Use your eyes, man.
Jeff, stop yelling.
I don't understand why there's so many people that are willing to walk in front of a runaway train for these two players that couldn't give a crap about this club that we love so much and would be on the next plane out of here if we weren't overpaying them so much more than they'd be making everywhere else. It boggles my mind.
But those are two different things, Jeff.
To take a bullet
two
for
different things, and that's not the point. The point that was made, and again, we'll make this quick and then we'll move on, is that they are superb footballers. They are really good footballers. I'm not going to hear that they're not good footballers. I think that the thing here is that they're in a situation where this is just not working right now. Right? Whether it's the talent around them or them personally, whatever's going on in their lives, it's not working right now. And I don't know if you fix it. I'm not saying Terry will fix it. All I'm saying is that, again, for the future benefit of this club, some of the players that are not named Federico Bernardeschi or Lorenzo Insigne, I'd like to see what Terry Dunfield can do with those players.
100%.
Because again, you gotta get a tune out of those players, because it's not like there's going to be a ton of money dropping out of the sky to save you again in this window. Like everybody's like, well, are we going to do something in the transfer window? But like Bill Manning is running this transfer window, guys. I don't think that's. Maybe something happens. Maybe they're able to make a trade within the league.
It's not just Bill, though.
I know it's not just Bill, but like he's overseeing the high level.
Yeah, Jason Hernandez is probably running this transfer window. Is my best guess.
Yeah,
nice.
But in the end of the day, those decisions will still have to go by Bill, right? Like in the end of the day, like those decisions probably, unless maybe a small trade, sure. But if you're going to make the roster decisions that some people are looking to make, they will have to go by Bill. And he will essentially have the yes or no, the thumb up or thumb down, to make a long story short. Okay. Before we get into the burning question, I want to ask one more question about this firing and then essentially the state of Toronto FC now with this sacking, which I feel like we're doing every week with this club. So crisis club.
Club in crisis.
How does this firing of Bob Manning or Bob Bradley, they're now melded into one person, impact the club beyond the first team? So we've been talking about the first team. That's what the majority of people care about. Of course, we understand that. We've talked about sort of what did this look like for the club now and moving forward, but Bob Bradley touched more than just the first team. He was touching everything, right? That includes the academy, that includes developing young players. Like what is the impact? Because I think, Mike, you had said it in a previous podcast. It's like if you fire this guy, it's not just firing the manager, it's firing the sporting director, it's firing the academy head, it's firing the person that's building the structure of this club. Now that person's gone, what does this mean for the first team and beyond? And more importantly, the academy that you're looking to potentially bring first teamers to, and et cetera.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect, right? I think every time you watch TFC2 play, they're playing a type of profile or type of football that Bob Bradley would have wanted them to play. And that's the type of football that he wanted to instill in his players that would help them graduate to the first team. So when you bring in a new head coach, you're now going to do it under his philosophy and his ideas and his way of playing the game. So that immediately has an effect there. The other big thing I'll kind of point to just behind the scenes is their recruitment. Bob Bradley was the guy for the recruitment. Yes, they had other guys, and of course now you have Jack Dodd that left the club as well, the team's head scout before this. But at the end of the day, everything was kind of going through Bob there. He had the final say and the final check off, just in terms of, who stays and who goes. So now that he's gone, TFC was already in the process of kind of revamping that overall process. But I wonder now with you have to imagine it probably won't be a new head coach and sporting director. You have to imagine that TFC will like to go the GM route once again. So when that new GM comes in, what exactly are they bringing with them? Because not only do the TFC need a guy who can make trades and make signings, they need a guy who can implement a full-fledged scouting network. They need a guy that can implement a full-fledged, transfer philosophy and network and steps to make in a transfer. So they need to really hit on not only their head coach but their next general manager here, and it'll be a big job because I think the way that things operating right now, there's not much of an infrastructure there.
I'm of the mind that Bob was so busy having a blood feud with the Italians that he was pretty lax on what he wanted to accomplish with the academy and with TFC2. I really do. I think a lot of his attention.
That is not true at all. He was almost at every TFC2 home game.
Well, being there watching versus doing.
Well,
that's
home game, and he also spent his Monday nights and Wednesday nights with the actual academy, not just the TFC2.
Yeah.
So he wasn't watching Toronto Till I Die. He wasn't watching our show.
Then I'll take my licks. I'll take my L there. But from my eye test, it just seemed to me like it was a step too far, and that he wasn't willing. He didn't get as much done on that side.
How would you measure that?
Pardon?
How would you measure that?
Well, just from what I've seen, watching TFC2 games. I mean, in a lot of ways,
TFC2 made the playoffs for the first time last year. They were actually really good last year.
No, they were. I just wonder if we had Bob on the show and you asked him, did you give us a percentage of what you think you got accomplished in terms of the sporting director side, in terms of setting up the two team and the academy and all that stuff? I think he would. I suggest that he would probably lament that he didn't get as much done as he would have hoped, as a consequence of the stress that he had to go through with the first team.
I think that's fair, but also you got to remember, like, if you're bringing in an academy director or a sporting director that overlooks those kind of things, the results of those don't happen overnight. Those take years, to literally years. If you're talking about the academy, right? Because like you're building in a structure and then you're bringing these kids through the different age groups year over year over year. So that's sort of where I'm going with the question. And look, I don't think there's one solid answer yet, but I think that, having to keep chopping and changing different philosophies and how you want to do things and how you want to set up your team and how you want to recruit players, both internationally for the first team, but also for young players in the academy. What type of profile of player do you want to bring into the academy? Like, those things get severely impacted every time you have to chop and change a manager. The reason you have the crop of young players you have now is because you had Greg Vanney in that role for a long period of time, who was able to set down roots and build a plan and get to see a little bit of that start to come back in terms of planting the seeds, watering it and fertilizing it properly and watching it grow. Yeah. I think whether you separate that role from the sporting director and the sporting director and academy head, and then you have a head coach of the first team, however you want to do it. I'm not saying there's one perfect way to do it, because there isn't, because a lot of clubs do a lot of different things. But I think there needs to be some emphasis on that, because, you know, like you said, Mike, the next person they got to hire, or the next set of people they need to hire, have to be right.
It's gonna be set of people. The one question let me ask before we get to our burning question is, do you guys think that TFC need to completely hit the reset button here, or is there any salvaging kind of the foundation that Bob Bradley was able to establish here? Do you think it just has to be a complete reset?
I don't think it has to be a complete reset. I think you do have to. You'll have to. It's a bit more of a salvage job, if that's kind of the right way to look at it. Like, I think there's going to be, you're not going to keep, you know, at the end of this offseason, the thing is a lot of these guys are under long-term contracts. You're not going to get rid of them easily. You know, the DPs are here until somebody can pay for them, or you just got to eat another big contract again.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, look, you're still paying Josie to not play football right now. You know, so from that perspective, you're going to have to salvage a little bit. You're going to have to, you know, you may have to run with some players you think you don't want to see right now, whether that's a DeAndre Kerr, who right now at $90,000, at least on the MLS player union salary, is your highest scorer on the team right now. So, or tied for highest goal scorer on the team. So, you know, you may need to salvage a little bit of that and see what you can get. And maybe have to go down a little bit of the MLS sort of go down to this MLS Salvation Army store and kind of, like, you know, rebuild from that perspective. Not rebuild, but again, sort of build pieces from there and try to get a little bit better. Because I don't think this age of having to go out and sign all these internationals on big TAM money and stuff like that, until you develop a proper scouting network that can really find proper talent like that, useless, waste of your money.
Yeah, I just want to answer Graham's question. He says, what is it, a reset? Nothing is in place. We just have to build. Well, how do you build if you have no money? How do you build if you have no cap space? When I say there has to be some sort of reset, in my opinion, I think there does need to be a reset, because I almost think, and I know this is going to be really unpopular when I say this, I almost think TFC have to consider trading Sean Johnson, trading potentially Matt Hedges, trading guys who actually have some value, even though they're good players on the team, because I'm not sure this current crop of Toronto FC was built the right way to win. So when you are able to get future assets for some of these guys, I think it might be worth actually doing for the betterment of the long-term success of Toronto FC. Now I know that, again, like I said, that's probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but Sean Johnson is only signed to a 2-year deal. He's got a 1.5 years remaining on his contract. Do you think Sean Johnson is re-signing with Toronto FC? Do you think he's enjoyed his time when in his press conference he said the only thing he came to do here is win? I don't think there's a lot of players that are lining up right now to kind of stay at this club. So I almost think that, you know, not only on the roster, but I also think behind the scenes, you kind of just need to tear it down just in general and just kind of start fresh. Again, like I said,
be okay with
and be fair to the process.
That's why I said it's going to be an unpopular opinion. It's going to be unpopular.
This won't happen in a year. We tried to do it in a year. It took 2 years, and look at where it got us. We need to be fair to the process, that this rot is deep. And we need to be the kind of team that isn't planning on being competitive next year or the year after that, or maybe even the year after that. But what was your question again, Mike? The initial question?
Do we need a reset button?
Or why don't you ask Federico and Lorenzo, since they run the team now? I mean, they've got the answers to everything. That's where I'm at with this club, man, is that it all has to go by their desk, right? Because we've now put the power in their hands.
All right, let's
go to the burning question, because that will answer that. The burning question presented by Nextdoor. Nextdoor is the official community app of Toronto FC. It's also where you can connect with people and your local businesses in your neighborhood. We'll be posting the burning question each week in Nextdoor's TFC fan group. So join today by downloading the app or going to nextdoor.ca. As we mentioned earlier, our first giveaway from our friends at Nextdoor is now ongoing. Get that extra ballot by joining the TFC fan group on Nextdoor. But the question we dropped yesterday on Nextdoor and today via Twitter: if Toronto FC could, do you think they should sell one or both of Federico Bernardeschi or Lorenzo Insigne this summer? Lots of responses and lots of different sort of variations, because we did put this out on a poll. So on Nextdoor, the poll, just so you guys are interested, we kind of give the option of sell Bernardeschi, sell Insigne, sell neither, or sell both. And sell neither did win by about 39%, but the sell both was not that, sell both was not that far behind at 31%. So
I voted often. I cheated.
No, but
I will say though, Mike, that it did shift. I did notice the results shift
once
after the Bob Bradley announcement.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, so obviously there was some trending, because we did post this before the announcement of Bob Bradley's sacking. But some comments.
FYI, all our other potential questions were Bob Bradley questions, but we decided.
Yeah, but we decided that because we're like, they're not firing Bob Bradley. They're not doing this yet. They're not pulling the trigger. And then they did. So Danny just writes in, if Bob was staying, which he's not. So again, written before the announcement was official. I'd say sell Bernardeschi. He's been awful and has seemingly checked out socially. Not as out there anymore in terms of him just sort of being out in social media and things like that. But with Bob gone, this is a chance for him to reestablish. Just need a real manager with some global respect, no internal USL or CPL guys. Well, you got Terry Dunfield, so there you go.
Whoops.
And I don't buy that either. You have to go out and get some international manager to make this work. Like, teams in this league win with domestic managers. Okay,
but teams don't have Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi.
But some teams don't need Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi to win MLS Cup.
All teams don't need Federico Bernardeschi,
right? So from that perspective, again, different ways of building rosters. We just talked about tearing this one down. So there you go. A friend of the show, Rachel Dory, writes in and says, frankly, burn it to the ground. Both should go, as should Bill, which he has, and the entire sports performance department. The injuries are absurd. There needs to be new ideas and a fresh vision. Keep Oso, Richie, who may not be staying anyway, and the kids. Michael Bradley retires, remains with the club to help build it. Too much rot, start over. So that's friend of the show, Rachel Dory. And lastly, Gray, who's been in the comments here on the show, also just chimed in and said, isn't that easy to get rid of the DPs considering the dollars and terms on their contracts? It will take another club to be willing to pay them enough to entice them to leave. Definitely not contracts the club will want to buy out. Keep them both and see how this season plays out. Okay, Jeff, we know your opinion on the DPs. I'm going to hold on you for a second. Mike, I want you to come in.
How presumptuous. I love both of them, and we should keep them forever.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mike, your thoughts on... This is an interesting debate because... personally, when this was proposed as a burning question, I thought most people are going to be like, just keep them both, right? Like, what's the point? The money's there, and you might as well see what they can do. I wonder how you're feeling about this.
So, If Toronto FC could, I think they would in a heartbeat sell both of Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi if they could. Now, obviously, we know the albatross of a contract that Lorenzo Insigne is on, and there's other stipulations beyond just the financial value that come with that contract. So it's not as easy as him just, deciding to leave. Federico Bernardeschi is an interesting one because I actually think Bernardeschi is a contract that they could move.
Yeah.
Depending on what they would get in return. Now, also the question then becomes, when would be the right time to pull that trigger? And I do feel over this last stretch, now that, I think with Bob here, I think his relationship with Bernardeschi was severed. And I do wonder if there was thoughts from Bob Bradley about whether or not if the club should sell Bernardeschi. Obviously, Bernardeschi's form has completely dipped.
Dried up.
Over the last 12 matches. I think he has 1 assist or something like that.
It's dried up. It's completely dried up.
And you can tell it's completely in his head too.
Yeah.
You can tell he's getting himself in good areas, and the shots that he was hitting when he first joined TFC, he's just not hitting them anymore. And his finishing has just gone completely down the drain. So I still very much believe that there's an amazing, unbelievable player in there. And I'll say this again, because I can actually only say it for 1 more week. So let me just say it. Those 2 players right now are the most skilled players in Major League Soccer. Skilled. They're not necessarily the best players, but they're the most skilled players in Major League Soccer. I mean, you watch their first touch, you watch the way they spray balls, they're unbelievably skilled. There's no denying that. You can argue about their work rate, you can argue about their fit in Major League Soccer, you can argue about their mentality. Sure. The one thing I don't think anybody can deny is just how talented and skilled they are as soccer players. So, in a perfect world, you surround them with the right players, they click, everything's great and everything's happy. I just don't know if you can actually do that in Major League Soccer. So I actually think if TFC could, they would sell.
Jeff, burn them all, sell them all.
Do they need help packing? Because I got some free hours. Yeah. To me, I'm the only positivity that I take out of today, realistically, is the fact that there's nowhere to hide anymore, and we're gonna find out who these guys really are. And I'm gonna eat a lot of S when they get that new coach bump, which is coming, and everybody's gonna tell me I'm wrong. It will regress to the mean. I'm entirely confident of that. These people are soccer players second, drama queens first. And we've allowed that to happen. And their attitude stinks. And it's not getting fixed at this club because we've laid out the red carpet for them to continue along the same path. So we are the arbiters of our own demise here. And what I hope is that the next time that they decide to riot, which will be sooner rather than later, it puts into sharp relief for everybody just what we're dealing with here. And then we can discuss, because when you bet the house, you don't get your money back. We're not getting our money back for these guys. We made a bet. It was a bad bet. So the idea that we're going to recoup our losses is fantasy. So we now need to get comfortable with the fact that we're going to get fleeced any way you slice it. That ending this relationship isn't going to be a win for us. It's going to be a massive, massive loss. So I understand that there's some trepidation to do that. And I understand that there's a hope and against reality that it's all magically going to work out. Kumbaya. Terry Dunfield's going to come in, have a barbecue, and everybody's going to be making out with each other while we waltz to the MLS Cup. That ain't happening. It's only a matter of time before the other shoe drops. So my hope is that it's quicker. That we it's a quick death as opposed to a long drawn out one.
Just to play devil's advocate,
mm-hmm.
You've made your stance clear, but is there any part of you that thinks that Bob Bradley might have been part of the problem here?
100%. 100%.
In terms of managing the Italians.
I think they're unmanageable. I honestly think in MLS they're unmanageable. We've seen how they run from accountability. It's always somebody else's fault. It's not the fact that you stink and the defenders have found you out. It's tactics or some other ephemeral garbage. They have no accountability, and we've given them the forum to have zero accountability. So to expect that they're suddenly going to sack up and have accountability is a fool's errand. We have created this. We are the arbiters of our own demise. So, there is no saving this relationship. So even if...
My next question, Jeff, is, so then I think I've already asked this, just to be clear. Is there anyone that can come in and kind of instill that accountability from the Italians? Like, what if TFC, for example, what if they go and they get Andrea Pirlo, for example?
No.
Do you think he has the potential of...
No. I don't even... I would like them to go hire Bernardeschi's dad to coach. That would be hilarious. That would be absolute chef's kiss. And I don't think it would work even then. They're uncoachable. They're unmanageable. They think they're better than this team, and they think they're better than this league. And we've seen it. And I'm sorry, but you fool me once, you know, with your blonde locks and your Jays jerseys and your Olympicos, I'll account to that. You ain't fooling me twice. I drank the Kool-Aid once. I'm not drinking it again. I'm done with these guys. I'm done.
The one thing I will say, Jeff, that I agree with you there. This league has absolutely been a bit of a wake-up call for them. And I think Insigne even said this recently in I guess, the only time that he spoke to media this year. He said that MLS was more difficult than he anticipated. Now, I don't think he necessarily...
The rare moment of accountability from Lorenzo Insigne, by the way. I enjoyed that.
I don't think he necessarily meant like how talented the league was, but I think he more so meant just how much he'll have to work and how physically demanding this league is. And I think to his credit, since he's made those comments and even that game, I think Lorenzo Insigne has been fantastic for Toronto FC. And I think the biggest thing for me is just his mindset overall. When you saw him like last game, I mean, he is talking to his teammates. He's leading by example. He's doing all the dirty work. And of course he's also been producing. I mean, this guy has scored a goal or assisted in each of TFC's last 5
Could have had a tire on Saturday.
I think it's for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. Again, I think this ascent of Lorenzo is off the back of his acrimony with Berna. So when he's on the field alone, he's got an impetus to prove that Berna's the problem. This isn't working for the team; it's working for himself. And at the end of the day, yeah, there may be a goal in there, and we may get a few wins, but it's unsustainable, and it's pointless, and it's awful, and just horrific. And it's not a team that I want to spend all of my waking hours thinking about and supporting and bleeding for. I don't want to. You know what I mean?
I disagree with I think Lorenzo's intent and his mindset. I think at the beginning, maybe that kind of was what lit a fire in him, that article that came out and kind of painted him in a bit of a bad light. But I honestly think since then he's shown a pretty unselfish attitude. And when you talk to...
I'm already eating a shit sandwich in the comments, by the way. People are saying I know nothing about soccer and that I'm Taylor Twellman. No. Whatever. Bring it, guys.
Again, I like the stance that you're taking. I don't think you're necessarily that far off, to be completely honest. You're saying a lot of things that I agree with. I think maybe it's a little bit harsh. Now, again, Insigne, hopefully we're seeing a new Insigne. And if this Insigne is here to stay, and if the new manager, Terry Dunfield, or whoever it is able to revitalize Bernardeschi, then I think you're going to see Toronto FC start to have more success than they've had this season. Because we've talked about the margins haven't been that far off. So if they can get a difference maker or two, then who knows?
Yeah, my only thought to add to this is really, if you're going to sell one, it's Bernardeschi.
Absolutely. Yeah, get him out the door immediately yesterday.
Well, look, you could talk about the article and all that. I just honestly think MLS has kind of figured him out from that perspective. And if you're in yes, you play him as a 10, things like that, maybe that's where he will best be fitting with the team going forward. If that's how Terry wants to play, we'll find that out. But I do think there are other players out there that you can get at better money that can do something similar. And maybe not
don't wear
exactly
Coach Killer on their jersey. I mean,
what if the Italians had a striker? Do you think is that there's something we're just glossing over, the fact that this team hasn't been able to actually give them a striker?
I don't care anymore.
Sure, but again, at the end of the day, we don't. I can't keep. I do agree with Jeff there. I can't keep living in this sort of well, if they had a striker, maybe
if only this, then they wouldn't suck the bag anymore.
It's a big thing. You're not wrong, Mike. It's a big thing.
It's huge. It's a massive thing. Huge, but
I mean,
two playmaking wingers.
Yeah, but does that cancel the fact that? Does that cancel the fact that why did we blow our load on two playmaking wingers and not a striker?
Well, I spoke about that, right? The plan was to also bring in a striker, and then got cut.
Yeah, but I think that their own personal BS has superseded the desire to make it work with these guys, because I firmly believe it is never going to work with these guys. I'm positive about this. I will die on this hill.
Okay, with that,
let's see.
Jeff will die on that hill, and we'll end the show. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toronto Till I Die. We'll be back next Monday evening recapping TFC's Canada Day clash against Real Salt Lake and Terry Dunfield's home opener, or debut, I should say, as manager. I wonder if he's going to wear the tassel socks like he did when he was a player. That would be amazing if he came out in a suit and tassel socks.
Hey, Mike, it is time for Bachelor in Paradise. We're about 32 minutes behind. I hope you PVR'd it, buddy.
Don't worry. The wife will give me all the details. Big ask for all the viewers and listeners who watch or catch this in either podcast form, video form, whatever. Give us a retweet and follow on Twitter. Get yourself into that contest we were talking about earlier to win a sweet Federico Bernardeschi jersey, even though we were all talking about selling him right just now.
I will help you light it on fire if you like.
Yeah, just search Toronto Till I Die on the Bird app. Find the contest post, plus our past episodes, clips, links to the YouTube channel, and all our podcatchers. And of course, join on Nextdoor, the Toronto FC fan group, for an extra ballot to try to win that jersey. For Michael Singh and Jeffrey P. Nesker, I'm Mike Newell. See you next week.
Really enjoyed it.
And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.